The airport terminal was ordinary until a little girl did something extraordinary. She walked through the crowded space, fingers pressed against a woman's gray coat, but something was off, deeply off. She never spoke, never smiled, never met anyone's gaze. Then, without warning, her hand moved in a pattern. Tap, 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 pause, tap. A silent signal. No one understood except one. The only one who noticed was a man everyone feared. Anthony froze mid-stride, his maroon suit suddenly forgotten. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked onto the small hand moving against the gray fabric. A code he thought was buried with his past now pulsed through a child's fingertips. Suddenly, Anthony changed direction, cutting through the crowd toward the girl. His tattooed neck caught the fluorescent light as he moved with lethal purpose. Travelers stepped back instinctively, confused. Men like Anthony didn't chase down families in airports, but the rhythm of those taps told him everything the girl couldn't say out loud. Why would a child know a signal invented by the Mafia? Within moments, Anthony uncovered a truth so dark, the entire terminal would turn against him to protect it. Stay with us because this story will shatter everything you think you know about heroes and villains. Before we dive in, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust your gut when something looks wrong? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know if you'd notice what everyone else missed. The International Terminal had been alive since before dawn. Wheeled luggage rattled across glossy tiles, departure announcements crackled through overhead speakers, and sleep-deprived passengers dragged themselves from one checkpoint to the next. It was the kind of frantic morning where everyone was too absorbed in their own chaos to notice anyone else's suffering. But Anthony had spent a lifetime reading what others refused to see. He was about to check the departure board again when something caught his eye. A flash of gray fabric moving through the crowd. A woman in a coat, walking with purpose. And behind her, 2 small figures. Anthony's attention sharpened, though he couldn't have explained why. The woman in the gray coat moved like she belonged there, which was exactly what made Anthony look twice. She wore the uniform of 1,000 suburban mothers, sensible flats, dark slacks beneath the coat, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. The kind of woman who organized bake sales and knew everyone's name at PTA meetings. The kind of woman who blended into airport crowds like water into water. But Anthony hadn't survived 20 years in his profession by accepting surfaces at face value. He watched her navigate through the terminal, 2 young girls trailing behind. One looked about 8, the other maybe 6. Both wore light jackets despite the February chill that had been seeping through the terminal's entrance doors all morning. The older girl's jacket sleeves stopped well above her wrists. The younger one's pants were too short, showing pale ankles above scuffed sneakers. Wrong season, wrong fit. Details most people wouldn't notice during the chaos of travel. The woman kept moving, her pace steady but just slightly too fast. Not running, nothing that would draw attention, but definitely not the leisurely stroll of a mother managing excitable children before a flight. She was covering ground, putting distance between herself and the main security checkpoint. Anthony shifted in his seat, angling his body to maintain visual contact. The woman's hand gripped the older girl's wrist, not her hand. Wrist control, the way you'd hold someone you didn't trust to stay close voluntarily. The younger girl walked free but stayed within arm's reach, her eyes fixed on the polished floor. Neither child spoke, neither smiled. Neither showed any of the nervous excitement or exhausted whining that usually radiated from kids in airports. The woman's knuckles were white against the gray fabric of her coat, where she clutched a small purse. Her other hand maintained that iron grip on the older girl's wrist. From a distance, it probably looked protective, maternal even. But Anthony had restrained enough people to recognize the difference between guidance and control. This was control. They passed a family with 3 rowdy boys chasing each other around their father, who looked like he regretted every life choice that had led to this moment. The woman in gray didn't glance at them, didn't smile at the chaos the way normal mothers did, sharing that universal acknowledgement of parental struggle. She just kept walking. Anthony stood, leaving his empty coffee cup on the seat. He didn't have a plan yet, just the instinct that had kept him breathing through 2 assassination attempts and a federal investigation. Something was wrong with this picture, and in Anthony's world, wrong meant dangerous. He followed at a distance, using the crowd for cover. A skill he'd learned from counter-surveillance training, back when he was still doing street work instead of managing territories from climate-controlled offices. The maroon suit made him conspicuous, but the terminal was crowded enough that he could maintain visual contact without being obvious about it. The woman led the girls toward the international gates, the section of the airport reserved for long-haul flights. More security, more checkpoints, more opportunities for someone to notice if something was amiss. But nobody was noticing. A security guard leaned against a pillar, scrolling through his phone. A gate agent argued with a passenger about baggage fees. A pilot rolled his small suitcase past, talking on his cell phone. The whole apparatus of airport security hummed along, and not one person looked at the woman with the too tight grip and the silent children. Anthony closed the distance slightly. He could see the older girl more clearly now. She had light brown hair that needed washing, and her eyes moved constantly, tracking exit signs, scanning faces, cataloging her environment with the hypervigilance of someone expecting danger. That wasn't normal for an 8-year-old. That was survival behavior. The woman stopped at a seating area near Gate 52, finally releasing the older girl's wrist. She dug through her purse, pulling out boarding passes and a passport. The girls sat obediently, hands folded in their laps, backs straight. Too still, too compliant, like soldiers awaiting orders rather than children taking a break. Anthony positioned himself 3 rows back, partially obscured by a support column. He pulled out his phone, pretending to read emails while keeping the trio in his peripheral vision. The woman's voice drifted back to him, sharp despite its low volume. "Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. If you embarrass me, you'll regret it. Not if you misbehave. Not if you don't listen to Mommy. If you embarrass me." The older girl nodded once, mechanical. The younger girl's chin trembled, but she nodded too. Anthony's jaw tightened. He'd heard that tone before, in interrogation rooms and basement offices where men tried to break other men's spirits. It was the voice of someone who controlled through fear, who'd backed up their threats enough times that words alone were sufficient. The woman sat down between the girls, physically separating them. She kept her purse in her lap, one hand resting on top of it like she expected someone to try to take it. Her eyes swept the gate area, pausing on faces, dismissing most as irrelevant. When her gaze passed over Anthony, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. She'd noticed the tattoos, the expensive suit, the way he carried himself. She was categorizing him just as he was categorizing her. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded terminal. She looked away first, but her grip on the purse tightened. Her free hand moved to rest on the older girl's shoulder, possessive and warning at once. A message: "These are mine, stay away." Anthony didn't look away. He'd learned long ago that predators relied on polite society's aversion to confrontation. They counted on people minding their own business, on social contracts that said you didn't question a mother with her children, no matter what your gut told you. But Anthony had torn up his social contract years ago. The woman leaned down, whispering something to the older girl. The child's face went blank, that carefully neutral expression people wore when they were trying to become invisible. Then the woman stood, gathering the girls with a gesture. They rose immediately, falling into formation like well-trained recruits. She checked her watch, glanced at the departure board, and started walking again. Not toward the gate, toward the restrooms. Anthony waited 5 seconds, then followed. The terminal was a maze of corridors and alcoves, places where things could happen away from the main flow of traffic. Places where a child's cry could be muffled, where a confrontation could occur without drawing immediate attention. The woman pushed open the family restroom door, ushering both girls inside. Anthony positioned himself near the water fountain across the corridor, close enough to intervene, far enough to avoid suspicion. He counted seconds in his head, a habit from his years doing protection work. 30 seconds, 45, a minute. The door opened. The woman emerged first, checking the hallway before allowing the girls to exit. Her eyes landed on Anthony, still standing by the water fountain. This time she didn't look away. This time her expression hardened into something colder, more calculating. She knew he was following them, and she was deciding what to do about it. The woman walked past Anthony without acknowledgement, her message clear in the rigid set of her shoulders. I see you, but you don't scare me. The girls followed in her wake, falling into that same too-perfect formation that had first caught his attention. Anthony let them pass, maintaining his position by the water fountain. He'd been made, which meant direct surveillance was no longer an option. If he kept following them openly, she'd call security, play the frightened mother being stalked by a dangerous-looking man. The airport cops would detain him, run his ID, and while they were discovering his very interesting background, the woman and the girls would disappear onto whatever flight she'd booked. He should walk away. This wasn't his problem. He had a flight to catch, a meeting that would determine the flow of pharmaceutical imports for the next fiscal quarter. 7 figures, maybe 8. That's where his attention should be. But those girls' faces stayed with him. That mechanical obedience, that fear masquerading as good behavior. Anthony pushed off from the wall, angling his path to intersect with theirs one more time. Not following now, just another traveler moving through the terminal. He'd pass them going in the opposite direction, get one more look, confirm or dismiss his suspicions, and then he'd move on with his life. The woman saw him coming. Her spine stiffened and her hand dropped to the older girl's shoulder, possessive. Protective to anyone who didn't know better. But Anthony knew better. He'd seen that grip before in different contexts. It said, "You belong to me and I'll destroy you before I let you go." 20 feet separated them, 15. The woman's pace quickened, pulling the older girl along. The younger one struggled to keep up, her short legs working double time. 10 feet. The older girl's head turned slightly, tracking Anthony's approach with those hyper-aware eyes. She was cataloging him too, measuring threats, calculating odds. Too much awareness for a child. Too much fear. 5 feet. The woman started to veer left, putting more distance between herself and Anthony. But the crowd compressed around them, a sudden surge of passengers from a just-landed flight pouring into the corridor. The woman had to slow down, hemmed in by a wall of travelers dragging carry-ons and checking their phones. 3 feet, 2. They were level now, passing each other in the crush. Anthony kept his eyes forward, just another businessman navigating the chaos. But in his peripheral vision, he watched the older girl. Her hand rose, casual, almost absent-minded. It drifted toward the woman's gray coat, and for a moment Anthony thought she was just steadying herself in the crowd. Then she tapped. Once, twice, pause, once. Anthony's entire world narrowed to that small hand against gray fabric. Tap, tap, pause, tap. His feet stopped moving. Travelers flowed around him, annoyed at the sudden obstacle, but Anthony couldn't have moved if someone had put a gun to his head. That pattern, that specific rhythm. It was impossible. It couldn't be what he thought it was. Tap, tap, pause, tap. She did it again, more insistent now, and Anthony's breath caught in his chest. Syndicate Code 4, the distress signal. He'd invented it himself, 17 years ago, when his organization had started expanding into territories where communications couldn't be trusted. A simple pattern that could be tapped on doors, walls, tables, a way to signal duress without words. The pause was crucial, the signature that separated it from random noise. 1 tap, hostile present. 2 taps, immediate danger. Pause, 1 tap, send help. Only 12 people in the world knew that code. All of them were in his inner circle, men and women who'd sworn blood oaths and proven their loyalty in ways that left scars. He'd never written it down, never discussed it outside secured locations, never taught it to anyone who wasn't family. So how did an 8-year-old girl in an airport know it? The woman kept walking, oblivious or pretending to be. The girl's hand dropped back to her side, but her head turned just enough to glance back at Anthony. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second, and in that brief contact, he saw desperation so raw it physically hurt. She knew what she was doing. That wasn't random tapping. That wasn't a game. That was a cry for help in a language that shouldn't exist outside Anthony's criminal empire. His mind raced through possibilities. A child of one of his soldiers, somehow separated from protection. A kidnapping targeting his organization. But he knew the families under his umbrella, knew their children, had personally approved their security details. This girl wasn't one of them. The woman and girls were moving away now, getting swallowed by the crowd. In 30 seconds, they'd be lost in the terminal's maze of gates and corridors. Anthony's hand went to his phone automatically, pulling up his contact list. He could make calls, have people here in minutes. His organization had reach, even in neutral territory like airports. But minutes might be too long. The woman could board a plane, cross into international airspace, take those girls somewhere they'd never be found. The older girl looked back one more time, and her hand rose again. This time she didn't tap the coat. She touched her own chest, then pointed down at her feet, then made a small pushing motion toward Anthony. He understood. She was signaling, "I'm here, I can't move. Come to me." More code. Not his code, but close enough. She was adapting, using gestures that might mean nothing to a casual observer but everything to someone trained in covert communication. Who taught her that? Who trained this child to signal for help like an operative in enemy territory? The woman grabbed the girl's hand, yanking it down with enough force that even from this distance Anthony could see the girl wince. She leaned down, hissing something that made both children go absolutely still. When she stood up, her eyes scanned the area, landing on Anthony again. This time she smiled. Not friendly, not warm. It was the smile of someone who just realized they held all the cards. She mouthed 2 words, "Back off." Then she turned and continued walking. The girls pulled along in her wake. Anthony stood frozen in the middle of the terminal, travelers streaming around him like water around a stone. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to intercept, to do what he did best and solve problems with direct action. But he couldn't, not here, not without proof, not without understanding what he was walking into. That code, that girl. Nothing about this made sense. Everything about this screamed danger. Anthony started moving again, this time with purpose. He wasn't following anymore. He was hunting. And if that woman thought a smile and 2 words would make him back off, she'd badly miscalculated the kind of man she was dealing with. The girl had sent a distress signal in his language. That made her his responsibility, whether he wanted it or not. Some codes, once spoken, couldn't be ignored. Some calls for help demanded an answer. Anthony cut through the terminal like a shark changing direction, no longer pretending to be just another traveler. The maroon suit became a weapon now, his presence a statement. People scattered from his path without conscious thought, that animal instinct recognizing apex predator energy. The woman in gray was 40 feet ahead, moving toward gate 52 with the girls in tow. She checked her watch, picked up her pace. Probably had boarding starting soon, probably thought she'd run out the clock on whatever suspicions Anthony harbored. She thought wrong. Anthony closed the distance in seconds, his long strides eating up the polished floor. He didn't run, didn't need to. He just moved with the kind of inevitability that made people step aside without being asked. A businessman with a coffee fumbled his cup trying to get out of the way. A teenager pressed himself against a wall, eyes wide. The woman sensed him before she saw him. Some survival instinct of her own made her glance back, and her face went pale when she realized how close he'd gotten. She yanked the older girl forward, practically dragging her now, abandoning any pretense of casual travel. But she was hemmed in by the gate area ahead, a bottleneck of passengers queuing for an earlier flight. The corridor narrowed, clogged with bodies and luggage. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Anthony stepped in front of them, a wall of maroon suit and tattooed menace. He didn't touch anyone, didn't need to. His presence alone was a barrier, 6 feet of controlled violence blocking their path. The woman stopped short, nearly stumbling. The girls crashed into her from behind, but neither made a sound. That unnatural silence again, that trained quietness. For just a moment, the woman's mask slipped. Real fear flashed across her face as she looked up at Anthony, at the ink crawling up his neck, at the cold assessment in his eyes. She recognized danger when she saw it, knew exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. Then the mask snapped back into place, replaced by indignation, so perfectly performed it would have fooled anyone who hadn't seen that initial terror. "Excuse me, sir," her voice pitched loud enough to carry, drawing attention from nearby travelers. "You're blocking our way." Anthony didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at her with the flat, patient expression of a man who'd stared down cartel enforcers and federal prosecutors and walked away from both. The woman's hand tightened on the older girl's shoulder. "We're trying to get to our gate. Please move." Still Anthony said nothing. He let the silence stretch, let it become uncomfortable, let nearby passengers start to notice the confrontation. A middle-aged man in business casual slowed his walk, frowning. 2 women stopped their conversation, sensing drama. Good. Witnesses meant the woman couldn't make the girls disappear without explanation. Witnesses meant accountability. The woman's eyes darted left and right, calculating. Anthony could see the gears turning behind her eyes. How to handle this? How to defuse it? She was smart enough to know that making a scene could backfire, but also smart enough to weaponize social expectations. She chose her attack carefully. "I don't know what you want," she said, voice trembling now, adding a layer of fear that sounded genuine enough. "But you're scaring my daughters." "My daughters," possessive, claiming ownership. Anthony's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level when he finally spoke. "Your daughters." "Yes, my daughters." She pulled both girls closer, the younger one pressed against her side, the older one trapped between her and Anthony. "And I don't appreciate strange men following us through the airport." More heads turned. The business casual man took a step closer, protective instincts kicking in. One of the women pulled out her phone, probably ready to call security. The woman saw the shift in the crowd and pressed her advantage. "We've noticed you watching us, following us. It's inappropriate and frankly, it's frightening." She was good, Anthony had to give her that. Her voice carried just the right blend of fear and offense, the tone of a mother protecting her children from a predator. She'd flipped the script perfectly, turned him from observer to threat. "I have every right to get my children to our flight without being harassed by." She paused, letting her eyes travel deliberately over Anthony's tattoos, his expensive suit, the whole package that screamed criminal. "By men like you." Men like you, there it was. The card she'd been holding, the trump she knew would work in a place like this. She was weaponizing his appearance, counting on society's prejudices to protect her. The business casual man moved fully into Anthony's peripheral vision now. "Is there a problem here?" Anthony ignored him, kept his eyes on the woman. She stared back, challenge and triumph mixing in her expression. She thought she'd won, thought she'd backed him into a corner where any move he made would look aggressive, threatening, criminal. "No problem," Anthony said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume. "Just noticing how tightly you're holding those girls, like you're afraid they might run away." The woman's smile tightened. "They're children. They need supervision in a crowded airport." "Is that what it is?" Anthony shifted his gaze to the older girl, who'd gone absolutely rigid. "Supervision." "I don't have to explain myself to you." The woman's voice rose another notch. "You need to leave us alone, or I'm calling security." "Call them," Anthony said flatly. That stopped her. Her mouth opened, closed. She hadn't expected that response, hadn't anticipated he'd welcome official intervention. People like him were supposed to avoid cops, avoid attention, slink back into shadows when confronted. The older girl was staring at Anthony now, her eyes wide, pleading, begging him not to back down, not to walk away. "I said, call security," Anthony repeated, louder this time. "Let's all have a conversation about where you're taking these girls." The woman's face flushed red. "How dare you imply?" "I'm not implying anything," Anthony cut her off. "I'm stating facts. Those girls are wearing the wrong clothes for the weather. They haven't spoken once. And you're gripping them like prisoners, not children." Gasps from the growing crowd. The business casual man looked uncertain now, glancing between Anthony and the woman, seeing the details Anthony had pointed out. The woman's mask cracked further. "You have no right." "And that girl," Anthony continued, his voice hard as steel now, "tapped a distress code on your coat. A very specific code that very few people in this world know. So I'm going to ask you one time, who are you and where are you taking them?" The woman's face transformed, fear and calculation giving way to something far more dangerous, righteous victimhood. She pulled both girls behind her in a theatrical gesture of protection, her voice rising to a pitch designed to carry across the entire gate area. "This man is bothering my children." The effect was instantaneous. The small crowd that had been watching with uncertainty suddenly solidified into a unified front against Anthony. "He's been following us," the woman continued, her voice breaking just enough to sound genuinely distressed. "Through the whole terminal, I tried to ignore him, but he keeps approaching us, and now he's blocking our path." The business casual man stepped fully between Anthony and the woman now, his chest puffed out with borrowed courage. "You need to back off, buddy." "Yeah, leave them alone," someone else called from the crowd. A woman in a tracksuit, face flushed with second-hand outrage. Anthony stood his ground, watching the theater unfold with grim familiarity. He'd seen this play before, knew all the acts, could predict every line. The woman in gray was conducting an orchestra, and every face in the crowd was an instrument she knew how to play. "Look at him," the woman said, gesturing at Anthony like he was evidence in a trial. "Look at those tattoos, that suit. Does he look like someone who should be approaching children in an airport?" More murmurs from the growing audience. Anthony could see them doing exactly what she wanted, seeing exactly what she wanted them to see. Not a man asking questions, not someone who'd noticed something wrong, just a criminal, a thug, a monster who'd crawled out of whatever dark holes spawned his kind. "I have daughters," an older man said, stepping forward. Gray hair, glasses, cardigan that screamed retired teacher or accountant. "And if someone like you came near them, I'd—" "You'd what?" Anthony's voice cut through the noise, quiet but sharp enough to silence the building mob. He looked at the older man, then swept his gaze across the crowd. "You'd defend them, like you're defending her right now." "Damn right," the business casual man said. "We're not going to stand here and let you intimidate a woman and her kids." Anthony almost laughed. Almost. The irony was too perfect, too painful. These good people, these righteous defenders of innocence, had no idea they were protecting exactly the kind of monster they thought they were standing against. Look at how quickly she uses the crowd against him. She knows people will judge Anthony by his tattoos and suit. Would you have sided with the innocent mom or the scary guy? If you hate how liars manipulate good people, hit that like button. Let's expose the fakes. "Have any of you actually looked at those girls?" Anthony asked, his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. "Have you noticed they haven't said a single word, that they're wearing summer clothes in February?" "Maybe they're traveling somewhere warm," a woman offered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe you should mind your own business," the business casual man shot back, finding his courage again in the safety of the crowd. The woman in gray had tears in her eyes now, real or manufactured, it didn't matter. They were effective. "I just want to take my Bobbies home," she said, her voice small and broken. "Please, someone call security, I don't feel safe." 3 people reached for their phones, simultaneously. Anthony watched the girls during all of this. They stood behind the woman, silent as always, but the older one's eyes were locked on him. She'd stopped pleading. Now she just looked resigned, like she'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. The bad guy gets away. The good people save the monster. The system protects the predator because she looks the part and he doesn't. You people have no idea what you're doing, Anthony said, not bothering to hide his contempt now. We know exactly what we're doing, the older man in the cardigan said. We're protecting this family from someone who clearly has no business approaching them. Based on what? Anthony demanded. My tattoos, my suit, the fact that I don't look like someone you'd invite to a barbecue. Based on the fact that you're scaring them, the tracksuit woman shouted. Look at those poor bobbies. Anthony did look. The younger girl was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking at Anthony. She was looking at the woman in gray, and the terror in her eyes wasn't fear of a stranger. It was fear of punishment. The older girl saw Anthony notice. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, a tiny gesture that said, Don't. They won't believe you, they never do. Security's coming, the business casual man announced, phone still pressed to his ear. So you better leave now if you know what's good for you. The crowd had grown to at least 20 people now, a wall of righteousness and misplaced heroism. They'd formed a protective barrier around the woman and girls, and Anthony could feel their collective judgment like a physical weight. In their eyes, he was everything wrong with the world. Dangerous, criminal, other. The woman in gray met his eyes over the crowd, and she smiled. Not triumphant, not gloating, just satisfied. She'd played this perfectly, weaponized every prejudice, exploited every assumption. These people would testify on her behalf, would tell security that a threatening man had been harassing a poor mother and her children. And security would believe them. Everyone would believe them. Because who wouldn't believe a frightened mother over a man with neck tattoos and dead eyes? You should be ashamed of yourself, a young mother with a stroller said, bouncing a baby on her hip. Approaching children like that, what's wrong with you? Anthony could have answered that question, could have told them exactly what was wrong with him, all the sins that had led him to this moment in this terminal. But it wouldn't have mattered. They'd already decided who he was, what he represented, what he deserved. I'm not leaving, Anthony said simply. Then you'll be arrested, the business casual man said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. Justice being served, the bad guy getting what he deserved. 2 airport security officers appeared at the edge of the crowd, hands resting on their belts, scanning the situation. They saw the crowd, saw the woman with children, saw Anthony standing alone. They knew immediately who the problem was. Sir, one of them called out, already moving toward Anthony. We need you to step away from these people. The woman in gray pulled the girls closer, the perfect picture of a mother seeking protection. The older girl's hand twitched, like she wanted to reach out, to signal again, to scream the truth that no one would believe. But she didn't. She just stood there, silent and terrified, while good people protected her captor and condemned her only hope. The security officers were closing in, hands still resting on their belts but ready to escalate. The crowd pressed closer, a living barrier of misplaced righteousness. Anthony had maybe 30 seconds before this situation spiraled beyond his control, before they dragged him away, and the woman in gray disappeared with those girls forever. 30 seconds to confirm what he already knew. 30 seconds to get proof that would mean something to people who'd already decided he was the villain. Anthony ignored the officers, ignored the crowd, ignored the woman's increasingly frantic performance. He locked eyes with the older girl, the one who'd tapped the code, the one whose resignation cut deeper than any knife wound he'd ever taken. What's your name? He asked, his voice cutting through the noise. Don't answer him, the woman in gray snapped, pulling the girl back. You don't have to talk to this man. Sir, step back now, the lead security officer commanded, moving to Anthony's left. His partner circled right, standard containment positioning. Anthony didn't move, didn't blink, just kept his eyes on the girl. Your name, he repeated, softer this time. The girl's mouth opened, closed. She looked up at the woman in gray, seeking permission that wouldn't come, then back to Anthony. Her lips formed a word, so quiet that Anthony had to read it more than hear it. Dora. The woman jerked Dora back hard enough to make her stumble. I said don't talk to him. Ma'am, it's okay, the the second security officer said, misreading the situation entirely. "We're handling this. Sir, this is your final warning. Step away or you will be detained." Anthony raised his hands slowly, a gesture of compliance that fooled no one. But it bought him a few more seconds, and seconds were all he needed. "Dora," he said, keeping his voice calm, conversational, like they were the only two people in the terminal. "What's your favorite color?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Confused glances rippled through the crowd. The business casual man frowned, as if Anthony had just confirmed his insanity. Even the security officers exchanged looks, uncertain. "What kind of question?" the woman in gray started. But Anthony wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Dora, and as he spoke, his right hand moved. Casual, natural, just a man gesturing while he talked, except the gesture wasn't random. His tattooed fingers formed a specific shape. Thumb and pinky extended, 3 middle fingers folded down. An old signal, one from the early days of his organization when they'd needed silent communication in hostile territory. It meant, family, safe, trust me. Dora's eyes widened fractionally. Her gaze dropped to his hand, to the specific pattern of his fingers, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Hope. Terror that hope might be a lie. "Favorite color, Dora," Anthony repeated, his hand still held in that position. "Simple question." The woman in gray was pulling at Dora now, trying to drag her away. "We're leaving. This is harassment. Officer, are you going to arrest him or?" Dora nodded. It was barely perceptible, the tiniest dip of her chin, but Anthony saw it. She'd recognized the signal. She knew what it meant, which meant someone had taught her his organization's codes, someone who'd been close enough to learn them. The implications made Anthony's blood run cold. "Sir, hands down now." The lead security officer had his hand on his weapon, voice sharp with authority and growing alarm. Anthony lowered his hands slowly, but his eyes never left Dora's face. "Blue," she whispered, so quietly that only Anthony and the woman in gray could hear. "My favorite color is blue." But as she spoke, her right hand moved against her side. Fingers forming shapes that matched Anthony's, that same sign for family. She was confirming, acknowledging, communicating in a language that shouldn't exist between a mafia boss and an 8-year-old child. "That's enough." The woman in gray's voice cracked with something other than fear now. Anger, recognition of her own. She'd seen the exchange, understood that something had passed between Anthony and Dora, something that threatened her entire operation. She switched tactics instantly, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Blue," she said, looking directly at Anthony. "Her favorite color is blue. There. Question answered. Now leave us alone before I press charges for harassment." The lead security officer grabbed Anthony's arm. "Sir, you need to come with us, now." But Anthony had what he needed. That nod. That sign. Confirmation that Dora knew codes she shouldn't know, signals that were never taught outside blood oaths and criminal enterprises. Someone had prepared this girl, had taught her how to call for help in a language only Anthony's people spoke. Which raised a question more terrifying than any answer. Why? "She knows the signs," Anthony said, not resisting as the officer pulled at his arm but not moving either. "Ask her how she knows them. Ask her who taught her." "I don't know what you're talking about," the woman in gray said, but there was panic in her eyes now. She understood that Anthony had gotten through, had made contact, had confirmed suspicions that would be much harder to dismiss. "The hand signals," Anthony pressed. "The code she tapped, who taught her?" "No one taught her anything." The woman's voice was rising again, but this time with genuine fear rather than performance. "She's a child. She was just fidgeting." Dora's face had gone absolutely white. She was staring at Anthony with an expression that broke something in his chest, a mixture of hope and terror so profound it physically hurt to witness. "Officers," the woman said, recovering her composure with visible effort. "This man is clearly disturbed. He's harassing us with bizarre accusations, making up stories about codes and signals. Please remove him so we can catch our flight." The second officer had Anthony's other arm now, both of them trying to pull him away. The crowd murmured approval, justice being served, the scary man being controlled. But Anthony kept his eyes on Dora. "Who taught you?" he asked one more time. Dora's mouth trembled. She looked at the woman in gray, at the officers, at the crowd of strangers who saw her as something to protect rather than someone to save. Then she looked back at Anthony, and tears started streaming down her face. "My mama," she whispered. "My mama taught me before they took her." The woman in gray went rigid. "She doesn't know what she's saying. She's confused, Your mama," Anthony repeated, his voice gentle despite the officers now actively dragging him backward. "What was your mama's name?" "Violet," Dora said, louder now, the word breaking on a sob. "Her name was Violet." Anthony stopped resisting, let his body go slack in the officer's grip, let them think they'd won, that he was complying. But his mind was racing through databases of information, connections, names and faces from 17 years of criminal enterprise. Violet. He knew that name. The security officers had Anthony's arms pinned now, professional and efficient in their containment. The lead officer, a thick-necked man whose name tag read RODRIGUEZ, was calling for backup on his radio. His partner, younger and visibly nervous about manhandling someone who looked like Anthony, kept glancing between the tattooed neck and the expensive suit, trying to reconcile the contradictions. "We're going to escort you to a holding area," Rodriguez said, his voice the practiced calm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "You can explain yourself there." "I'm explaining myself now," Anthony said, not struggling but not cooperating either. "That woman is trafficking those children." The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with accusation. Then the woman in gray laughed, not hysterical, not defensive, just a short, incredulous sound that said, "Listen to this lunatic." "Officer, please," she said, her voice trembling with what sounded like exhausted patience. "This man has been following us, harassing us, and now he's making insane accusations. My daughters and I just want to go home." Rodriguez looked between Anthony and the woman, and Anthony could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. On one side, a well-dressed woman with 2 quiet children, all of them looking appropriately distressed. On the other, a man with neck tattoos, dead eyes, and the kind of presence that screamed organized crime. The math wasn't hard. "Sir, you can file a complaint through proper channels," Rodriguez said, already dismissing Anthony's claims. "But right now, you need to come with us." "Proper channels," Anthony repeated, his voice flat. "By the time I go through proper channels, those girls will be on a plane to somewhere you'll never find them." "He's obsessed with us," the woman cut in, her voice rising with fresh panic. "He keeps saying these horrible things, accusing me of, I can't even." She pulled both girls closer, the picture of maternal protection. The younger security officer shifted his grip on Anthony's arm. "Let's go, sir. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The crowd had grown even larger, drawn by the drama. Anthony could see phones up, recording. Tomorrow this would be on social media. Dangerous criminal harasses mother and children at airport. The narrative was already written. The verdict already decided. The woman in gray caught his eye over Rodriguez's shoulder, and she smiled. Small, private, victorious. She knew exactly how this looked, knew exactly how it would play. The system wasn't designed to protect children from people like her. The system was designed to protect people like her from people like him. This is the most frustrating part. The system is protecting the predator because she looks the part. Have you ever been judged unfairly just because of how you look? Comment, don't judge, below if you think respect should be earned, not assumed. "Check her documentation," Anthony said, keeping his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. "Check the girls' tickets, run their names, something won't match." "We'll do our jobs, sir," Rodriguez said, and there was a note of condescension in his tone now. "After we deal with you." "After," Anthony repeated, "by which time she'll be through security, on a plane, gone." "I have every right to board my flight," the woman said, indignation perfectly pitched. "We've already been delayed by this. She gestured at Anthony like he was something distasteful she'd scraped off her shoe. The business casual man who'd first intervened stepped forward, emboldened by the presence of authority. "Officers, I witnessed the whole thing. This man followed them, blocked their path, made threatening statements. These poor people have done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong," Anthony said, looking at the man with something close to pity. "You're so sure of that." "I believe my own eyes," the man shot back. "I see a mother protecting her children from someone who clearly has violent intentions." "Violent intentions," Anthony said softly. "Because of my tattoos, because of how I look." "Because of how you're acting," the tracksuit woman added from the crowd. "Normal people don't chase families through airports." Rodriguez was pulling Anthony backward now, creating distance between him and the woman in gray. His partner had a hand on his pepper spray, just in case. They'd profiled Anthony the moment they'd arrived, same as everyone else. The ink, the suit, the demeanor, it all added up to trouble. "What gate are you flying out of, ma'am?" Rodriguez asked the woman, his tone gentle, protective. "Gate 52, she said, her voice still shaky. "We're supposed to board in 20 minutes. Can we please just go? I need to get my daughters away from this man." Rodriguez nodded. "We'll make sure you get there safely, and we'll need a statement about this incident." "Of course, officer," the woman said. "Whatever you need, I just want to cooperate." Cooperate, the magic word. The woman who was trafficking children knew exactly what to say, exactly how to act. She was playing a character she'd probably perfected over years of practice. Anthony watched Dora over the officer's shoulders. The girl was staring at him, tears still streaming down her face, that expression of resigned hopelessness back in her eyes. She'd tried. She'd signaled. She'd broken her silence, and the system had protected her captor anyway. "Officer Rodriguez," Anthony said, his voice dropping to something colder, harder. "I know how this looks. I know what you see when you look at me. But I'm asking you, professionally, to verify that woman's documentation before you let her board that plane." "We'll handle it, sir," Rodriguez said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He was humoring a suspect, nothing more. "Will you?" Anthony pressed. "Or will you escort her to her gate, apologize for the inconvenience, and send her on her way?" Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "We follow protocol." "Protocol," Anthony said. "Which in this case means protecting the woman who looks trustworthy and restraining the man who looks dangerous." "It means maintaining order and safety," the younger officer snapped, finally finding his voice. "Safety," Anthony repeated. "Ask those girls if they feel safe." "They're terrified," the business casual man shouted. "Of you." Anthony looked at Dora again. "Are you?" he asked her directly. "Are you terrified of me?" Dora's mouth opened, and for a moment Anthony thought she might find the courage to speak the truth. But the woman's hand clamped down on her shoulder, white-knuckled and warning. "Don't answer him, sweetheart," the woman said, her voice saccharine. "You don't have to talk to bad men." Bad men. There it was again. The label that explained everything, justified everything. Rodriguez started pulling Anthony away more forcefully. "Let's go, now." "One question," Anthony said, not resisting anymore because resistance would only confirm their narrative. "Just ask her one question." "We're not playing your games," the younger officer said. "Not a game, a simple question." Anthony looked at Rodriguez, trying to find something human behind the professional mask. "Ask her where they're flying to." "That's none of your business," the woman in gray said quickly. "Then it should be easy to answer," Anthony countered. Rodriguez paused, clearly torn between procedure and the nagging sense that something about this didn't add up. "Ma'am, where are you and your daughters traveling today?" The woman hesitated for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Anthony to notice, long enough for doubt to flicker across Rodriguez's face. "Home," she said finally. "We're going home." "Which is where?" Rodriguez asked, his tone shifting slightly. The woman's smile tightened. "I don't see why I need to tell you that. Am I being accused of something?" Just routine questions, ma'am." "Routine," the woman repeated. "After this man has traumatized my children with his accusations, now you're interrogating me." The crowd murmured disapproval. She was turning the tables again, making herself the victim of both Anthony and the security officers. Rodriguez backed off immediately. "No, ma'am, not interrogating, just trying to get all the facts." "The facts," the woman said, "are that this dangerous man harassed us, and we'd like to board our flight before we miss it." She'd won. Anthony could see it in Rodriguez's expression, in the way the younger officer relaxed his grip slightly. The system had done what it always did, protected people who looked safe and punished people who looked dangerous. The woman in gray gathered her girls and started toward Gate 52, Rodriguez escorting them personally now, protective rather than suspicious. Dora looked back one last time, and Anthony saw his own failure reflected in her eyes. Anthony stopped fighting the officer's grip, let his body relax, hands rising slowly in surrender. The younger officer tensed, expecting a trick, but Rodriguez recognized genuine compliance when he saw it. "Check her bag," Anthony said, his voice calm as still water. Rodriguez frowned. "What?" "Her bag," Anthony repeated, nodding toward the woman in gray who was already 15 feet away, moving toward Gate 52 with her prize. "Check what's inside. If there are children's clothes, toys, snacks, anything a mother traveling with 2 young girls would pack, I'll go to jail right now. No complaint, no lawyers, no resistance." The crowd went quiet. Even the business casual man stopped his righteous muttering. Rodriguez studied Anthony's face, looking for the con, the angle. "You're willing to be arrested if we don't find what you say we'll find." "I'm willing to be arrested if you find what a real mother would have packed for her daughters," Anthony clarified. "Children's belongings, age-appropriate items, evidence that those girls are actually hers." The woman in gray had frozen mid-step. She turned slowly, and the mask slipped for just a second. Real fear flashed across her face before she recovered. "This is absurd," she said, but her voice had changed. Less confident now, more defensive. "You can't just search my bags because some criminal makes wild demands." "We can if there's reasonable suspicion," Rodriguez said slowly, his cop instincts finally kicking in. He'd heard something in her tone, seen something in her reaction. "Reasonable suspicion," the woman's laugh was brittle. "Based on what? His word, look at him." "Based on the fact that you're refusing a simple search that would clear this up immediately," Anthony said. "A real mother would be opening her bag right now, showing everyone the pull-ups and juice boxes and stuffed animals. You're stalling." The crowd's energy shifted. People were looking at the woman differently now, seeing the white-knuckled grip on her purse, the way she'd positioned herself between the security officers and her luggage. "I have rights," the woman said. "You can't just violate my privacy because this man is harassing me." "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, and his voice had gone professional in a different way now. "If you have nothing to hide, this would be a quick way to resolve the situation." "I don't have to prove anything to you or him," she shot back. "My daughters and I are leaving. If you want to detain me, you'll need probable cause." She knew the language, knew her rights. That wasn't the reaction of a flustered mother. That was someone who'd been trained, who'd done this before. Rodriguez saw it too. His hand dropped from Anthony's arm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see inside your carry-on bag." "Am I being detained?" "Not yet." "Then I'm free to go." She started walking again, pulling the girls with her. "Ma'am, stop." Rodriguez's voice carried command now. "If you leave, I will have to detain you." The woman stopped. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath, and when she turned around again, something had changed in her expression. The fear was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "Fine," she said. "Search the bag. But when you find nothing, I want this man arrested for harassment, false accusation, and emotional distress to my children." She set her carry-on down with deliberate care, unzipped it, and stepped back. "Go ahead, officer. Humiliate me in front of all these people." Rodriguez approached the bag cautiously. The crowd pressed closer, phones still recording. Anthony remained between the two security officers, watching. Rodriguez opened the bag fully, and his expression went carefully neutral. Professional. The face of a cop who just found something he wasn't expecting. He pulled out a zippered pouch first, opened it. Stacks of cash bound in bank bands, hundreds from what Anthony could see. Thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands. The crowd murmured. The woman's face stayed impassive. "Traveling money," she said. "Perfectly legal." Rodriguez set the cash aside and reached into the bag again. He pulled out clothing. A black dress, adult size, a pair of heels, makeup bag, another outfit, professional, businesslike. No children's clothes. He dug deeper, methodical now. A laptop, a folder of documents, another zippered pouch with more cash, jewelry, a burner phone still in its packaging. The younger officer moved closer to watch. His hand had drifted back to his pepper spray, but for different reasons now. Rodriguez looked up at the woman. "Where are the kids' things?" "In the checked luggage," she said smoothly. "I didn't want to carry more than necessary." "You're traveling with 2 young children," Rodriguez said, "and you didn't pack any toys, snacks, entertainment, or even a change of clothes in your carry-on. They're well-behaved. They don't need constant entertainment." Rodriguez glanced at the girls. Both stood absolutely still, hands at their sides, faces blank. The younger one had stopped crying. They looked like soldiers at attention, not children on a trip. "What about pull-ups?" the younger officer asked, finding his voice. "My sister's kids are around that age. She never travels without pull-ups just in case." "My daughters are potty-trained," the woman said, ice in her voice now. "Snacks," Rodriguez pressed. "Juice boxes, crackers, something for the flight. We'll eat on the plane. Comfort items, stuffed animals, books. We don't believe in coddling children with unnecessary possessions." Rodriguez stood up slowly, leaving the bag open on the floor like evidence at a crime scene. The contents told a story that contradicted everything the woman had claimed. This was a businesswoman's luggage, someone traveling alone, someone carrying enough cash for a transaction rather than a vacation. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your boarding passes and identification," Rodriguez said. "For all 3 of you." The woman's jaw tightened. "Am I being detained?" "Yes." The word dropped like a stone. The crowd's energy shifted again, confusion giving way to understanding. They'd been wrong. They'd defended the wrong person. Protected the predator while condemning the one who'd tried to help. Anthony watched Dora. The girl's eyes were wide, hope and fear warring on her face. She didn't dare move, didn't dare speak, but her whole body trembled with the possibility of salvation. The woman in gray reached into her coat pocket slowly. "My identification is right here, officer. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." Her hand emerged holding a wallet, but her eyes swept the terminal, calculating exits, measuring distances. Anthony recognized that look. He'd seen it in the faces of men who were about to run or fight. Rodriguez saw it too. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm just getting my ID like you asked." But her voice had gone flat, emotionless. The mask completely dropped now. No more frightened mother, just a professional caught in a trap. The younger officer moved to flank her, closing off her angle to the exit. The woman smiled, thin and cold. "You're making a terrible mistake, officer. Do you know who I work for?" "I don't care who you work for," Rodriguez said. "Show me your identification, now." The woman opened her wallet with deliberate slowness. But instead of pulling out an ID, she held it up so Rodriguez could see inside. Anthony couldn't make out the details from his position, but he saw Rodriguez's face go pale. "That's what I thought," the woman said softly. "Now we're going to walk away and you're going to forget this happened, all of it." Rodriguez stood frozen, staring at whatever was in that wallet. And Anthony realized the game had just changed again. Whatever Rodriguez saw in that wallet had shaken him. His face had gone from professional authority to genuine fear in the space of a heartbeat. The younger officer noticed his partner's reaction and tensed, hand moving fully to his weapon now. The woman in gray smiled wider. "That's right, officer. So let's not make this any more complicated than it needs to be. You've had a stressful day. Someone filed a false report. You investigated, found nothing actionable, and sent everyone on their way. Simple." Anthony had seen this before. Not here, not exactly like this, but close enough. Credentials that stopped investigations cold. Badges that opened doors and closed cases. The kind of identification that said, "This person is protected, this operation is sanctioned, these questions end now." But Rodriguez was still holding the wallet, still staring at whatever was inside, and Anthony could see the war happening behind his eyes. Training versus self-preservation. Duty versus survival. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing the shift in dynamics without understanding it. Even the business casual man had backed up a step, his righteous certainty evaporating in the face of something he couldn't name but could feel. "Sir," Anthony said quietly, speaking directly to Rodriguez, "whatever that says, whatever authority it claims, those girls are still hostages. That hasn't changed." Rodriguez's hand trembled slightly. "You don't understand what you're—" "I understand perfectly," Anthony cut him off. "I understand that someone gave her credentials that are supposed to make you look the other way. I understand that you're being asked to let 2 kidnapped children disappear because it's easier than dealing with whoever is backing her." The woman's smile faltered. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." "Neither do they," Anthony nodded toward the crowd, the witnesses, the phones still recording. "But they will. That's the thing about public spaces. Hard to make things disappear when everyone's watching." Rodriguez looked at the crowd, at the phones, at the permanent record being created in real time. Whatever the credentials in that wallet said, they couldn't erase video evidence, couldn't silence dozens of witnesses, couldn't undo what had already been broadcast. The woman saw the same calculation. "Officer, I'm ordering you to—" "Check the girls' boarding passes," Anthony said. "Match them to the tickets, check the names." Rodriguez hesitated for one more second, then made his choice. He handed the wallet back to the woman and turned to her. "I need to see the boarding passes, now." "You're making a career-ending mistake," the woman said, but her voice had lost its edge. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her. "Maybe," Rodriguez said, "but I'm making it in front of 40 witnesses and a dozen recording phones. So if my career ends, everyone will know why." He was smart, smarter than Anthony had given him credit for. He'd realized the same thing Anthony had. Whatever protection this woman had operated in the shadows. Exposure was the enemy. Documentation was death. The woman's face went blank. She reached into her coat again, slower this time, and pulled out 3 boarding passes. Rodriguez took them, examined them, then pulled out his phone and made a call. The wait lasted maybe 90 seconds, but it felt like hours. The terminal had gone so quiet Anthony could hear the wheeled luggage clicking across the floor 50 feet away. Rodriguez's expression changed as he listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. He looked at the girls, then at the woman, then at the boarding passes. "The tickets were purchased separately," he said finally, lowering his phone. 3 different transactions, different credit cards. The girls' tickets were bought 2 days ago. Yours was bought this morning." "I changed my plans," the woman said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. "The names on the girls' tickets," Rodriguez continued, "don't match the names on their identification. They're traveling under my maiden name for safety." "They don't have identification," Rodriguez interrupted. "No passports, no birth certificates, nothing." The crowd's murmur rose again, understanding dawning. Rodriguez gestured to his partner. "Detain her." The younger officer moved fast, pulling handcuffs from his belt. The woman didn't resist, just stood there with that blank expression as her wrists were secured behind her back. "You have no idea what you've done," she said to Rodriguez. "No idea who you've crossed." "I know I'm protecting 2 children," Rodriguez said. "That's enough." The moment the cuffs clicked shut, Dora broke. She pulled free from where she'd been standing and ran, not toward her sister or Rodriguez or the crowd. She ran straight to Anthony. She hit his legs with enough force to make him take a step back, small arms wrapping around his waist, face pressed against the maroon suit. Her whole body shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and wounded. The younger girl followed, quieter but just as desperate, grabbing onto Anthony's hand with both of hers. Anthony stood very still, aware of the phone's recording, the crowd watching, the permanent record being created. He was a criminal, a killer, a man who'd done things these good people couldn't imagine. And here he was, with two crying children clinging to him like he was salvation. The irony wasn't lost on him. Rodriguez was already on his radio, calling for backup, for child services, for someone qualified to handle traumatized children. The woman in gray was being led away, silent now, her mask completely shattered. The business casual man approached, shame written across his face. I'm sorry, I thought. You thought what you were supposed to think, Anthony said quietly. That's what people like her count on. The crowd was dispersing now, the show over, though Anthony could see some of them lingering, guilt and confusion on their faces. They'd been so certain, so righteous, so wrong. Dora looked up at Anthony, tears still streaming down her face. My mama, she said. She told me if I ever needed help to use the code. She said someone would understand. She said someone would come. Anthony's chest tightened. Your mama was right. She said to look for the maroon suit, Dora continued. She said the man in the maroon suit would know what to do. The world tilted. Anthony's hand went to his jacket, the distinctive color his signature for years. The color Violet would have known. The color she would have described to her daughter before. Before what? Before she disappeared. Before she was killed. Before she became another ghost in Anthony's collection of failures. Where's your mama now? He asked gently. Dora's face crumpled. I don't know. She told me to be brave, to remember the code. Then they took her and I never saw her again. Rodriguez approached, phone still in hand. Child services is on the way. We'll need statements from everyone, including you. Anthony looked down at the girls still clinging to him. This was where he should disappear, where he should extract himself before official documentation connected him to this incident. Before questions were asked about how he knew the codes, why he recognized the signals, what his relationship was to Violet. But Dora's fingers were gripping his suit jacket, white-knuckled and terrified of letting go. I'll wait until they arrive, Anthony said. Rodriguez nodded, respect in his eyes now instead of suspicion. 20 minutes later, two women from child services arrived with blankets and calm voices. They were professionals, trained for trauma, and they gently coaxed the girls away from Anthony with promises of safety and food and warmth. Dora resisted at first, but Anthony knelt down to her level. You're safe now, he said. These people will take care of you, I promise. Will I see you again? She asked. Anthony didn't lie to children. I don't know. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A bracelet, braided from embroidery thread, the kind kids made at summer camp. She pressed it into his palm. Mama made this, she said. She told me to give it to the maroon suit. She said you'd know what it meant. Anthony looked at the bracelet. The pattern was simple but deliberate. The colors weren't random. They were a code, another message from a ghost. He closed his fist around it. Thank you, Dora. The child services workers led the girls away, Dora looking back every few steps until they turned a corner and disappeared. Rodriguez approached one more time. I'll need you to come to the office, give a formal statement. Of course, Anthony said. Just let me make a phone call first. Rodriguez hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Anthony walked toward the windows overlooking the tarmac, pulled out his phone, and made a call. It rang twice before Vincent answered. Find out everything about someone named Violet. Anthony said without preamble. Everything, and find out who else knows about the syndicate codes. Which Violet? We've got 3 in the database. The one who had a daughter named Dora, Anthony said. The one who's probably dead. The one who taught her child our signals and told her to look for a man in a maroon suit. Silence on the other end. Then, "Boss, what did you walk into?" "I don't know yet," Anthony said, "but I'm going to find out." He ended the call and turned to head back to Rodriguez, but something made him glance toward the terminal entrance. A black sedan had pulled up to the curb. 3 men in dark suits were climbing out, moving with purpose toward the security checkpoint. They had the bearing of federal agents, but Anthony had been around enough real feds to spot the differences. These were private contractors, cleanup crew. They were here for the woman, maybe for the girls, definitely to contain whatever had just been exposed. Anthony looked at the bracelet in his palm one more time, memorizing the pattern, the message Violet had died to send him. Then he pocketed it, turned away from Rodriguez and the approaching men in suits, and walked in the opposite direction. Not running, just moving with purpose through the crowd, another traveler heading to another gate. By the time Rodriguez turned around to find him, Anthony had vanished into the flow of passengers, the maroon suit disappearing like smoke. On the bench where he'd been standing, he'd left his first-class ticket to Prague. On the back, written in his precise handwriting, "Tell Dora I'll find her mama." Anthony didn't stick around for a reward. He did the right thing even when the whole world thought he was the villain. We need more people who do good in the dark. Subscribe if you're part of the squad that stands up for the weak, no matter what.